Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another beautiful video on this beautiful channel, on this beautiful day. How you guys and girls doing? Welcome to your first Lua basic tutorial. So no C++, nothing else, just basic Lua, alright? And hopefully you watched the previous video on how to install Lua for Windows and for Linux and stuff like that. I gave you an explanation. Otherwise just Google how to install Lua for Windows or Linux or whatever. You should find the executables, the installers and everything for your system. But if you just look at the previous video, I show you where to go and download stuff. The only thing I'm unsure about is Mac, but I'm pretty sure you'll be able to find it if you know how to do it for Linux. But still, there you go. So assuming you installed Lua, you just want to write Lua here and you'll get a Lua command line. You can either do that or just type CMD down there and open your regular control line or your regular terminal. So you'll be like, it will just look just like this. And if you've installed Lua, you just write Lua and it will open the Lua environment for you. So here we can code Lua. Now before I get started, I just want to tell you guys and girls, please go check out the description box. There's a bunch of links there. You can find the links for the install pages there as well. If you want to check that out, you have my support page. You can follow me on Twitter, like and subscribe if you can. Otherwise, just keep watching, that's fine. And I hope you find these videos useful. So let's just get started. I just want to tell you guys and girls what Lua is. So Lua is an interpreted language, and I touched on that in the last video. That means that there is something in the background always running, interpreting the code and kind of translating it like a real-time translator to a language that the computer understands. So usually programming languages are built so that humans can understand them. So when I write it, I understand what's going on. But it always has to be converted into computer code, right? Something the computer understands, the computer's language, which is hardware code. And other languages do the same thing. It's just that they require compilation. So you write the code in C++ or Java or something, and there is a compiler that compiles all that, which is just the fancy word for translating, translates that properly into hardware code, and it kind of runs on the computer's processor and everything you need it to do. But a interpreter is a little different. It doesn't compile. It compiles in real time, kind of. It translates all the code in real time as it's running, and you don't have to recompile. You don't have to spend that time building something again. Imagine a big program or game where you have to make one small change and then recompile or rebuild the whole system. It takes a long time for making changes. You don't want that. So often game developers and other big system developers use scripts to kind of shorten down that compile time and make changes in real time. So you will be able to see a change you're making in real time, in runtime, instead of having to shut down, rebuild it. So that's a really good way of using a scripting language. And Lua is good for just that. And it's very, very easy and flexible. And it's really easy to understand everything. And there's often a garbage collector as well in the background. And that just means that you can do whatever you want and you probably won't get memory leaks, right? So it's kind of collecting all the garbage data and everything that doesn't have a pointer to it anymore. Or there's no memory leaks in that sense. So you can do stuff more freely and without the same kind of care that you have to use in C++ or something like that. And yeah, so it's really good. It makes it a little more flexible and easy to work with. But this background process always running kind of puts a big strain on the computer. So it's kind of give and take. So you kind of get this ease of use, but you kind of give away the performance in that sense. But there are different versions of Lua, like Lua JIT, the Lua just-in-time compiler, which we'll use in our other tutorial series where we use Lua with C++. And that kind of really helps out Lua in running much more efficiently. And we'll talk about that in that tutorial. But there you go. So in this video, I just want to talk about Lua itself. So let's get started. Lua works in chunks. This is a really good thing to start off with. And we're also going to talk about variables shortly here. And there are a few types of variables. But let me just tell you about chunks first. So a chunk in Lua is basically a piece of code that is consistent. All right, it's not consistent, but it kind of sticks together. So it's a complete piece of code. There are incomplete pieces of code. Like if I were to create a variable, which is just a small little box that holds a value of a certain type. If I create a little variable, variable, and I just press enter, it's gonna give me the 2 arrows, and it's gonna be waiting for, okay, what am I gonna do with this? Like, what do you want me to do? So I have to write a complete chunk where I'll give it a value. So I'll assign it. This is an assignment operator. I'll assign it a 20. So a variable is a little box, a little container, a variable, which has been assigned a number 20. So anytime I access a variable, it will be containing the value 20. And I press enter. Now it gives me the 1 arrow. It's content, is happy. So that's a complete chunk of code. And in Lua, there can be big chunks of code and smaller chunks of code. Depends on what you're doing. So something like this is a very small chunk of code, but it has to be a complete chunk. And if I were to write a variable 2 equals 23, that's a complete chunk, so it didn't complain. Okay, so just remember that you want to make complete sentences in Lua, kind of complete statements, and that will be your chunks. Now we have these 2 variables, so what are we going to do with them? They're just containing data. A variable and a variable 2 is 20 and 23. So what am I going to do with this? Well, I want to print these. So I'm going to write print. This is how you print stuff in Lua. Print a variable. So when we press enter, we'll get a result here. We'll get a print of what a variable contains. So it contains 20. If I do the same, but I write a variable 2, we'll get 23. All right. Now assigning things to variables is easy because you can change the value of a variable. That's why it's called a variable. It varies. So a variable equals now 50. And then I print a variable and I'll get 50. You can also assign, if I make a new variable, it's just easier to write, a var 20 plus some value. You can assign it with a statement like this. So I can say it is the sum of these 2 values. So if I print a variable, I'll get 50, which is the sum of this. I can also say a variable equals a variable, the old variable, which is still stored in here, which should be 50 right now, plus 20. And then I print it and I'll get 70. So 50 plus 20 is 70. So you can kind of play around with it. You can use them in different ways. These are just names for values they're containing. Now the beautiful thing, sorry about that, the beautiful thing in Lua is that when you have a variable, this is containing 20 right now, but I can change it up to something called a string. So hi, I am a string. That is just a long text, right, with white spaces, with spaces and everything contained in it. It's just a long text, and they're started off by the 2 quotation marks, right? So you got a quotation mark here and a quotation mark to end it. And if I print a variable, I'll get hi, I am a string. So it doesn't crash if you give it something that's not a number, just because I gave it a number to start off with. That's what Lua is really good at. It's really dynamic like that. And C++, you'd have to make a whole different variable that contains strings and all that stuff. So that's really flexible, right? And I can change it back to a decimal variable, 2.3. And I can say print a variable 2.3. Okay? So that's kind of how variables work. And you can always change their values. And you can add stuff to them and you can do stuff. Just one thing that you can't do, if you're coming here from C++ or something, you can't do a variable plus or something like that. You have to, if you want to add 1, for example, if we have a variable equals 1, all right, and I print it, I'll get 1. Then I say a variable plus, that won't work. I'll have to do equals a variable plus 1. If I want to add 1 to whatever a variable was before. So this basically says 1 equals, or a variable equals 1 plus 1. So it will be 2 now. Now if I do the same thing again, I'll get 3, hopefully. 3. See? So that's kind of how you work with variables. And you don't have to worry too much. You can change the values. You can do whatever the hell you want with them. So that's a short little introduction on variables. And we'll keep working with those as we go along. There are different types now. I just want to say that Lua has numbers, strings, and booleans, and a nil value. If you create a variable and you say nil to it, it's nil, like that, and you print it, it will say nil. And nil in Lua means that it actually doesn't exist really. There's no data to it. Any valid variable will have some data associated to it. Nil is like resetting the variable completely. It doesn't exist anymore. So if I were to print a variable I never defined before, say print some variable, something we haven't defined before, it will say nil because it doesn't exist. And setting something to nil actually makes it so it doesn't exist in that sense. So there's nil, booleans, and numbers and strings. So I want to show you how a boolean works before we end off the video. So let's say a boolean equals true. Okay, now booleans only work with false and true, true and false. A true is a value of 1 or anything greater than 0. A value of 0 is false. Anything less than 0 is also false. So if I want to print a boolean, it will say true. If I chose to give it a false value, and we print a boolean again, it will say false. All right, now if I'm correct, I say a boolean equals 1 and I print a boolean. Oh well, sorry, that I'm dumb. Because Lua actually changes this to a number now. Doesn't matter, don't have to worry about it. If I say false and I say get type a boolean, wait, no, that's not it. Print type a boolean. Whoops, I forgot the last one. There you go. There we go. So okay, sorry about that. Well, if you say print and then type and within parentheses a boolean, then you can actually get the type of that variable, right? So if I were to do the same thing for a variable, it will say nil because I removed it. Variable, which still is 50, I'll get number. So the type of a variable is number. So Lua keeps track of the type of these variables. A boolean is right now a boolean, basically, but I can make it into string if I want. So yeah, play around with this. Play around with this, make some additions and stuff like that. You can use plus, multiply, division, modulus. You can just play around, go crazy, have fun, and try to make some cool stuff happen. And just the best way to learn Lua and these programming languages is just to play around and test stuff for yourself. Thanks for watching. Please check out the description box for all kinds of stuff. Follow me on Twitter, drop a like, subscribe if you want to. Otherwise, just keep watching. I hope you learned something. Best of luck, take care, and I'll see you guys and girls in the next one, alright? Bye-bye.